There can be some really big pitfalls when buying a house here in my market of Surrey, BC. And in today's video, I'm going to let you know the 3 biggest items to look out for. And if you don't want these items at all, or even if possibly you're looking at homes that may have these faults, well, hopefully this video will help you determine which homes you should or maybe shouldn't be looking at during your search. But really quickly, before I do, quite possibly the biggest pitfall of all is you not being subscribed to this channel to stay up to date on the Surrey and Fraser Valley markets. So please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And in return, I'm going to click the like button for you on your behalf. And that way we can move right on to this video all about the 3 things you probably weren't expecting to be such a big deal when you started dreaming about purchasing your next place. Now, quite possibly the biggest and scariest issue anyone could have when trying to buy a property would be that if that property contained an underground oil storage tank. You see, way back in the 1950s and earlier, if you had a furnace, there was a very good chance that it was run off of simply burning oil. And back then and now, you would obviously never want a big nasty oil tank to feed that furnace just sitting in your yard. So what did they do back then? Well, they dug a big hole and buried the thing in the ground. Out of sight, out of mind, right? But as you would imagine, burying that steel tank underground could have some real negative side effects, like when that tank is underground for so long that it rusts holes in the side of it and leaches oil into the earth. Now, over the years, tanks have been removed. Some were just left empty, and others have been filled with concrete or sometimes sand. And there's been different rules, I think some in 2006 and 2009 here in BC. But up until then, you didn't actually have to remove the tank in order to sell a property. But that has now all changed, and you're not supposed to be able to transfer the title of a property unless it meets the provincial fire codes for oil tanks, and that doesn't mean you're allowed to have any of those oil tanks in the ground any longer. I mean, in my career, I have sold houses that still have the oil tanks, but they are now above ground. But even though you're not allowed to transfer or not supposed to be able to transfer a title of a property that has a buried oil tank, it still happens. After all, that thing is buried, and well, the owner selling the property may not have even known it was there in the first place. And that might put them in a world of trouble if they convey that property with, again, an oil tank that they had no idea even existed. Now, the details of oil tanks, how to remove them, and who is found liable when an unknown tank is discovered, well, those are probably details for another video. But if you're looking for houses and you're worried that there might be an oil tank on the property that you're looking at, well, here are some quick pointers. First off, in my market here of Surrey, BC, most of the city had natural gas installed sometime in the early 1960s. So if you're looking at a property subdivided and built, I don't know, say after 1980, you're probably pretty safe, but it's not guaranteed. However, if you're looking at a home that was built in the 70s or before, it would be very much encouraged for you to pay a company to come out and scan that property for an underground tank. This is usually for a relatively small fee and well worth the peace of mind, and can usually easily be done within your subject removal period of any normal purchase. Some of these companies can scan with metal detectors or look for fill caps and vent pipes, or even the old oil lines that used to run through the foundation of the home into the oil burning furnace. Another thing you could do is call Fortis BC to see when the gas meter was installed or when gas was brought to the property. For instance, if you're looking at a 1954 home and Fortis, the gas company here, tells you that, well, gas didn't arrive at the property until 1971, you can fairly certainly assume that there was a tank on that property at one point, and most tanks were buried. But if you want to be completely certain, you should probably avoid looking at homes built in the 1960s or earlier. And particularly in my city of Surrey, BC, where oil tanks were prevalent in neighborhoods like Cedar Hills and Bolivar Heights. Now, each city will vary when it got natural gas. So again, this is my experience in the areas that I market. So please consult your realtor with your individual purchase to see what is best practice to discover an oil tank. And now let's switch to big item number 2, which is aluminum wiring. Again, this is something that is totally preventable in certain years of construction. It's pretty safe to say that, for instance, if you own a house in somewhere like North Delta that was constructed between, 1973 and 1976, it very likely contains aluminum wiring. Now, it's my understanding, I'm not an electrician, but it's my understanding that most homes, if not all homes, have aluminum multi-strand wiring coming from the street to the main panel, which is normal. But the wiring you should be concerned about is single-strand aluminum wiring inside the house between the panel and light switches or outlets. Basically, they are a big fire hazard, and most often a bigger fire hazard when mix and match with today's modern copper electrical fixtures. Now, often if there is an issue, it can be remedied with as little as maybe a few $1,000s, and that procedure is often called pigtailing. Basically, these are different forms of junctions that can properly connect the aluminum and copper so it doesn't cause a fire. And there's a very good chance you do not want to do this yourself. Many insurance companies will even want proof that this was done correctly by a licensed and insured electrician who can provide a detailed report and sign off on an electrical inspection. Now, an interesting point to note, recently I was actually at an inspection myself with an electrician who was looking at the aluminum wiring in the house. And I thought it was only 1973 to 1976 that was prevalent. But that inspector told me that he has seen aluminum wiring in houses as old as 1966. So if you're looking to skip both of these landmines of oil tanks and aluminum wiring, you again might want to start your home search with homes built or products built or even subdivided no later than 1980. And I guess as a quick side note that might be good to point out, this may also be the timeline to avoid products like asbestos. But I'm not going to cover that in this video, and that is not one of the big 3 that I'm worried about today. Because my number 3, and probably the most common and unexpected problem or situation that will arise for my clients when they're looking at real estate, is polybutylene piping, or poly B, as it's more affectionately known. Well, it's a hard gray pipe that was used as a cheaper alternative to copper from about 1983 or so through 1997, although it was not outlawed until 2005. Now, personally, I don't have an issue with poly B. I've owned homes with poly B, and I don't think it's often a big deal. That being said, there are different situations and types of installations of the pipe that are more worrisome than others. And the biggest issue with poly B is that it's more likely to be your insurance company that takes issue with it rather than the piping itself really becoming the issue. Now, poly B is in almost all real estate that was constructed between 1988 and 1997 here in my market. So if you don't want anything to do with that style of pipe, after doing your research, just avoid those years of construction altogether, and it will save you a whole bunch of headache. But if, for example, a 1990s condo is perfect for you because, well, they're often more affordable and usually you get a lot more square footage for the money, well, please go ahead and continue the research in this video all about poly B, as it's one of the most commonly viewed videos on my entire channel. And hopefully it will help you make a more informed decision for your purchase. And if you are having trouble making an informed decision and would like my team to help guide you through avoiding these construction pitfalls, well, you can go ahead and book a call with me right now using a link in the description below.